In 2008, scientists discovered a new species of human. A piece of a finger, found in a cave in Siberia, and when the geneticist opened the DNA, it did not match any human species ever recorded. Not Neanderthal, not Homo sapiens, not anything in the fossil record. Something else. A species that had lived alongside us, interbred with us, and shaped the biology of over 1 billion living people. And we had absolutely no idea it existed until the moment that finger bone landed on a laboratory table in Leipzig. This is their story. The Denisovans left almost none. No complete skeleton, no skull. A handful of teeth, 3 finger bones, a piece of rib. That is the entire physical record of a species that lived on this planet for hundreds of thousands of years. In this episode, you will understand 3 things. First, who the Denisovans were and how a species so widespread could leave almost no physical trace. Second, what their DNA reveals about where they lived, who they encountered, and why the genetic map of their existence is more detailed than anything archaeology has given us. And third, why a Denisovan gene that evolved for survival at altitude is, right now, keeping millions of people alive on the Tibetan plateau. A ghost species, almost no fossils, but their biology is still working in the world today. This is their story. The Denisovans split from the Neanderthal lineage approximately 400,000 years ago. While Neanderthals moved west into Europe, the Denisovans moved east, and then further east, and then further still. The genetic evidence suggests they occupied a territory stretching from Siberia across Central Asia to Southeast Asia, and possibly beyond. They lived in caves in the Altai Mountains. They crossed the Wallace Line into islands Southeast Asia. They reached New Guinea, perhaps Australia. No other archaic human species came close to that range. And yet we have almost nothing to show for it. No tools we can say with certainty were theirs alone. No art, no graves. The archaeological record of the Denisovans is essentially a silence punctuated by a handful of fragments, which makes what the DNA tells us all the more extraordinary, because the DNA does not show silence. It shows a species that was everywhere. Geneticists have found Denisovan ancestry in populations across East Asia, Southeast Asia, and Oceania. In Papuan and Aboriginal Australian genomes, Denisovan ancestry reaches 3 to 6%, significantly higher than the Neanderthal fraction carried by most people outside Africa. In the Philippines, one indigenous group carries the highest level of Denisovan ancestry ever recorded. As much as 5% of their genome traces directly to Denisovan individuals. This was not a small, isolated species hiding in one cave in Siberia. This was a widespread, successful population that encountered modern humans across half the planet. In 2010, Svante Pääbo and his team at the Max Planck Institute published the first Denisovan genome, assembled from the DNA of that single finger bone found 2 years earlier. The genome was extraordinary in its completeness, better preserved than most ancient DNA they had ever worked with. The cave's cold, stable conditions had kept the genetic material intact for somewhere between 50,000 and 100,000 years. What they found when they compared it to modern human genomes was immediate and unmistakable. Denisovan DNA was present in living people, not in the populations geographically closest to that Siberian cave, but in populations thousands of miles to the southeast, in Melanesia, in New Guinea, in Aboriginal Australians. The species had ranged further than anyone had imagined, and it had met modern humans, not once, but multiple times, in multiple locations, across tens of thousands of years. But the Denisovan genome held a deeper mystery. When researchers analysed the DNA more carefully, they found something that should not have been there. A lineage within the Denisovan genome that was even more ancient, a population that had split from both Neanderthals and Denisovans at least 900,000 years ago. The Denisovans themselves carried the DNA of an even older, completely unknown archaic human, a ghost within the ghost. We do not know who that species was. We do not know their name. We have no fossils, no tools, no physical evidence of any kind. Only a signal in the Denisovan genome that says something else was here before us. Since 2010, researchers have found Denisovan fossils beyond the original cave. A jawbone on the Tibetan plateau, teeth in southern China, the range expanding with every discovery. And in 2019, researchers identified a child, half Neanderthal, half Denisovan, a first-generation hybrid. A girl whose mother was Neanderthal and whose father was Denisovan, found in the same cave where the original fingerbone had been discovered. Two species, one child, one cave. The intersection of every archaic human story compressed into a single genome. The Tibetan Plateau sits at an average elevation of 4,500 meters above sea level. At that altitude, the air contains roughly 60% of the oxygen available at sea level. For most humans, living permanently at that altitude is not survivable. The body attempts to compensate by producing more red blood cells, a response that thickens the blood, raises the risk of stroke and heart failure, and causes a condition called chronic mountain sickness that kills its sufferers slowly. Tibetan people do not have this problem. For decades, researchers could not explain why. Tibetans have been living at altitude for thousands of years, but the genetic adaptation required to survive there should have taken far longer to evolve. The timeline did not work. Then, in 2014, a research team identified the gene responsible. A variant of a gene called EPAS1, sometimes called the super athlete gene, that regulates how the body responds to low oxygen. The Tibetan version of this gene does not trigger the dangerous red blood cell overproduction. It allows the body to extract oxygen more efficiently without the lethal side effects. When they searched for this variant in other populations worldwide, they found it in only 2 places, in Tibetans and in the Denisovan genome. The variant was not the product of Tibetan evolution. It was inherited. Somewhere between 40,000 and 30,000 years ago, modern humans moving into the high-altitude regions of Central Asia encountered Denisovans who had already spent thousands of years adapting to those conditions. They interbred, and the children of those encounters carried a gene that made the difference between surviving at altitude and dying there. Today, approximately 90% of Tibetans carry the Denisovan EPAS1 variant. The Tibetan Plateau is home to roughly 7 million people. Without that gene, that population, that culture, that civilization, those 7 million lives, may not have been possible. The Denisovans are gone. Their fossils are almost nothing. Their tools are invisible to us. Their faces we cannot reconstruct with certainty. But in the lungs of 7 million people breathing thin air on the roof of the world, the Denisovans are not gone at all. They are still breathing. Subscribe to follow the complete human journey through deep time. Next episode, the species that almost went extinct. 70,000 years ago, a supervolcanic eruption plunged the Earth into a years-long winter. The entire human population may have collapsed to as few as 1,000 individuals. We were that close.